VCDR presentation regarding the partial awards for the diplomatic claims of Eritrea. And this was the conclusion of the Claims Commission in 2005. To give you a bit of the political context, this was based on the Eritrean and Ethiopian War, which happened between 1998 until the 2000. And although the outbreak of the war was surprising for the international community, the official reason behind the outbreak was a border dispute. But as I'm going to explain now, there was that official reason was simply a mask for much deeper and complex problems regarding hegemonic aspirations. Right, so Eritrea, after the defeat of the Italian colonial rule, it was a British military administration from 1942 till 1952. From 1952 until 1962, following a UN General Assembly, Eritrea achieved a degree of independence by means of a local Eritrean parliament. But in terms of foreign affairs and defense, Eritrea was still a federal state within a federal status within Ethiopia. With this, it gave rise to the Eritrean Liberation Front, which was under suspicion of the rule of Ethiopia and started the main independence movement between the 1960s and the 1970s. And after the 1962, when the UN General Assembly decision of the Eritrean Parliament finished, Ethiopia decided to abolish the Eritrean Parliament and annex Eritrea, confirming the suspicions of the Eritrean Liberation Front. On the 1970s, this Eritrean Liberation Front, members of it split and formed the Eritrean People's Liberations Front, which is going to be the political coalition of our conflict, and it was a bit more left-wing movement. Okay, so now, from the 1974 until 1991, there was the Ethiopian Civil War. And this is important because both the Ethiopian People's Revolution Democratic Front, which was the political coalition of the moment in Ethiopia, and the Eritrean People's Liberations Front, which is the political coalition mentioned before, fought together with the Tigrayan People's Liberations Front against the Derg government. So what this means is that both Ethiopia and Eritrea were allies during the Ethiopian Civil War, and this can be one of the reasons why they decided to maintain their diplomatic relations. After the Ethiopian Civil War, the UN, as the international supervisor of the transitional government, decided that Eritrea should become an independent government, and finally in 1993 Eritrea achieved independence. However, there was a bit of a dispute regarding their borders, and specifically regarding the Badmen region. This is important because the Badmen region was a province of the Tigray, and the Tigray, which are the people of the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, which fought together in the Ethiopian Civil War, are a tribe that resides both in what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea. So, although, as I said before, the reason behind this conflict, the Eritrean-Ethiopian War, was the border dispute of the Badmen region, there's reasons to argue that it was more of a conflict between the ruling elites of the Tigrinya-speaking people in the Eritrean highlands and the Tigranians of Ethiopia. Okay, so the Claims Commission, which is the commission that we are going to be studying in our case. It was a commission that was set under the Algiers Agreement, which was the peace agreement for the end of the Ethiopian and Eritrean War. It was established in 2000, and it established a boundary commission to demarcate the border and a claim commission to assess the damages caused by the conflict. Claims were submitted to the commission within 1 year from the agreement, so all claims had to be submitted before 2001, and the commission was the only forum for such claims. In 2005, which is when our partial commission came out, the Claims Commission issued 7 partial awards and 2 final awards. Our award is one of the partial awards, and the Diplomatic Claims Award, which is our award, is worth mentioning because it had to assess the difficult paradox of the maintenance of diplomatic relations with an enemy state during wartime. Finally, for you to understand the mandate of our commission, the Claims Commission was established and operates pursuing Article 5 of the agreement, and Article 5 gives the Commission mandate to decide through binding arbitration all claims for loss, damage, injury by one government against another government.
So next we are going to talk about the proceedings, which are Eritrean and Ethiopian claim, statement, memorial, country memorial, and replies from 2001 to 2005.
Well, Eritrea's position is for liable loss, damage, and injury suffered by Eritrea in the diplomatic missions of the personnel and the archives, and also the signification of the damages to the representation of the Organization of African Unity and United Nations Economic for Africa. And well, yes, that's it.
So Ethiopia said that they fully comply with the international law and its treatment of Eritrea diplomatic and consular mission, and also the personnel in Ethiopia. So Ethiopia requested to dismiss Eritrea's Claim 20 and also rejected Eritrea's request for non-monetary compensation. So the most important applicable law is the Article 22, which talks about the premises of the mission that shall be inviolable. The Article 29 talks about the person of a diplomatic agent that should be protected by the receiving state from any attack on his person, freedom, or dignity. And the Article 2 established that diplomatic relations between states take place by mutual consent.
Well, when we talk about expulsion of diplomats and staff, Eritrea includes 3 main complaints under this category: the short length of time allowed by Ethiopia for the departure of Eritrean diplomats and staff, and then Ethiopia treatment of such personnel, and the size and makeup of Eritrean mission following the departures. Each raises different considerations that we are going to discuss further.
So Ethiopia says under the Article 9 that has the right a receiving state to declare a person, a diplomatic staff, a persona non grata. So this person has the obligation to finish his function with the Commission.
Length of time for departure. Eritrea alleged that 25 and 48 hours for departure period for the ambassador and diplomatic staff were unreasonable, were really short, and under the Article 9, Paragraph 2 of Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations mentioned a reasonable period, and for Eritrea this wasn't the case.
So Ethiopia said that identifying different instances, there were different receiving states that have allowed a shorter departure times. And the Commission said that what Eritrea said, that was not a violation of international law. So there was the case that the diplomats staff had time to gather all the family and all the transportable belongings. So at the same time, Eritrea allowed Ethiopian diplomatic staff leave in 48 hours Asmara in 1998. So Eritrea did the same thing to the Ethiopian staff, diplomatic staff. And the two organizations that were mentioning before was not under the power of the Commission, so the claim was dismissed.
Well, treatment of diplomatic personnel during departure. Eritrea alleged that detailed and corroborate evidence about the Ethiopian security officials physically searched diplomats and their luggage at the airport before their departure, and also, and this is worth because this is the chief of the mission, Ambassador Guimat, also detailed being pulled out of the boarding line and taken to a separate room with armed Ethiopian security agents. This is clear a violation of the protection that Ethiopia has to make under Article 29. The persona of the diplomat shall be inviolable, and the inviolability that Ethiopia must to obey is an active one and a passive one. Those are really important for first, the active one is the obligation to protect from any harm of third parties, and the other is a passive one that the authorities of Ethiopia cannot constrain any detention to the diplomatic staff of in this case Eritrea.
So the Commission finally dismissed for failure of proof the Eritrean's allegation, and also said that Eritrea's supported witness, the declarations were based on hearsay. So at the same time, the same treatment allegedly accorded by Eritrea to Ethiopian diplomats departing Asmara. So Eritrea did the same thing to the diplomatic staff in Eritrea.
Then size and makeup of the mission. Eritrea claims that Ethiopia violated Article 11 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, under which the receiving state may require that the size of a mission be kept within the limits considered reasonable and normal. And in this case, for Eritrea, it wasn't normal being or having two diplomats. It wasn't enough for performing the normal functions.
So Ethiopia said that the first and the second candidates had already been declared persona non grata, so Ethiopia has the right to not let them go to Ethiopia. And that's under the Article 11 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. And the Commission at the same time said that there was no violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations about the size and makeup of the mission, because the Eritrea embassy staff was not smaller than the Ethiopian embassy staff in Asmara, and the Eritrean staff were able to perform all diplomatic and consular functions. And about the individual staff and family members, that's under the damage claims and not under the power of the Commission.
Well, the seizure of the embassy, resident and detention of personnel, where Eritrea observed that the resident had been ranked up, the guard in the gap, and 3 embassy cards, embassy personal account, books, papers. Well, this is a clear violation of Article 22 about the premises that are inviolable of the authorities, even in wartime. In this particular case, they maintain the relationship, but if it wasn't the case and the relationship had been broken, even in that regard, the premises are still inviolable. So this is a case that Ethiopia missed this article.
So Ethiopia said that they didn't do all of this. They sealing up the residents from Eritrean use because they got national security reports saying that the Eritrean embassy was taking for legal purposes, were like stockpile weapons and counterfeit money. So that challenged the credibility of the claimants, Eritrea. And the Commission said that under the Article 43, Paragraph A of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, Ethiopia has the right to finish relations with Eritrea, but has not the right to take possessions while diplomatic relations continue, unless the head of the mission of Eritrea gives the permission.
Well, treatment of embassy staff and visitors. Eritrea alleged that armed Ethiopia security agents stop, question, search to documents and arrest visitors. So this is a blockade of the embassy, and this is intrusive because Ethiopia can't do this to the premises. It also affect the normal function of the embassy, and the staff, the visitors were identified and arrested. So this is also a clear violation of the Article 22, because even of course the viability of the missions are in place, but also to prevent any disturbance, and of course this wasn't the case.
So Ethiopia admits that blockade the embassy of Eritrea, but also say that Eritrea did it at certain times, and that was not the reason of the claim of Eritrea. Ethiopia said that the reason was because Eritrea was upset about running a diplomatic mission during an armed conflict. And the Commission said that both parties increased its monitoring and scrutiny of both embassies, and at the same time said that Ethiopian security measures didn't compromise the mission in violation of the applicable international diplomatic law. So Eritrea could perform all the function of the diplomatic mission.
Okay, now the interference with the embassy communications. Well, Eritrea alleged that it was unlawfully interfere with Eritrean embassy communications, intermittently disconnecting telephone lines, tapping telephone lines, and taking an open embassy mail. So this is a clear violation about the protection that Ethiopia has to make about the premises and the freedom of the communication.
So the Commission said that there was no evidence about the lack of the telephone capacity to carry on the operations of Eritrea, and also said that the allegations of the tampering supporter was supported only by a solely conclusory statement in the Charges declaration.
Well, then interference with the Organization for Africa Unity and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa participation. This is another interference, because declaring persona non grata Ambassador Grima affects the representation in this organization. So this is also an interference for the diplomatic relations of Eritrea.
So the Commission said that there was not an absence of international law basis for Eritrea's allegation, and had to dismiss the claim of Eritrea. And at the same time, there was no suggestion that Eritrea wanted the ambassador to stay for the multilateral diplomatic function in those both organizations. And at the same time, Ethiopia had the rights to reject the candidate because it was declared a persona non grata in 1997.
Finally, the Eritrea request for additional remedies. First, monetary compensation. Second, desist of any interference with the diplomatic and consular activities to keep performing its functions. Restore embassy residence to Eritrea. Pay for the damages for seizing the premises, and restore access to funds held in diplomatic bank account.
So Ethiopia dismissed Eritrea claims for non-monetary relief for not showing this required by the decision number 3. And also, all about the staff member who lost property in expulsion is not under the power of the Commission, it's under the damage claims.
Okay, so to sum up all of the Commission's resolution, Although Ethiopia was held responsible for what was named the possible of loads of international law violations under the Vienna Declaration. The Commission finally said that Ethiopia was only held responsible for the actions it took during the departure of Eritrean diplomats. Specifically, in the first case, it was the ones regarding the search of the Eritrean ambassador's person, his luggage, the briefcase, etc., which constitutes a violation under Article 29 and 36, and on the other hand, the fact that they entered, ransacked, and searched the Eritrean embassy, which is a violation of Article 22. And although Ethiopia argued that there was compelling reasons for criminal activity inside that embassy, as Martin explained, the premises of the embassy are still completely unviolable. Moreover, the Commission also said that both Eritrea and Ethiopia were not defenseless against this situation, and as Leticia also mentioned, under Article 43 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, both states were able to terminate their diplomatic relations, and in the case of the embassy, seal off the embassy, as Ethiopia argued, and basically protect their interest during wartime. So finally, the importance of our case and the Commission's conclusion was that although Ethiopia and Eritrea maintained diplomatic relations, they did so knowing the associated risks to their diplomatic personnel. And although the Vienna Convention, which is the treaty for this case, although the Vienna Convention encourages the maintenance of diplomatic relations, this case shows that it's very hard to protect their interests, and it causes a problematic application of the standards and rules governing diplomatic relations. The main paradox here was that the security provider for the embassy and the diplomatic personnel was the same state that they were in war with. So what the overall conclusion is that if belligerent parties or states decide to maintain their diplomatic relations, they cannot derogate from their fundamental obligations under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, and notably in this case, the ones regarding to the inviolability of the diplomatic agents, in this case the ambassador, and the premises because of the exigencies of war. And this is the end of our presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.